Gospel of John, chapter 6, verses 1 through 15. After this, Jesus went to the other side of the Sea of Galilee, also called the Sea of Tiberias. A large crowd kept following him because they saw the signs that he was doing for the sick. Jesus went up the mountain and sat down there with his disciples. Now the Passover, the festival of the Jews, was near. And when Jesus looked up and saw a large crowd coming toward him, he said to Philip, "Where are we to buy bread for these people to eat?" Jesus said this to test him, for he himself knew what he was going to do. Philip answered him, 6 months' wages would not buy enough bread for each of them to get even a little. One of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, said to him, "There is a boy here who has 5 barley loaves and 2 fish. But what are these among so many people?" Jesus said, "Make the people sit down." And there was a great deal of grass in the place. So they sat down, about 5,000 in all. Then Jesus took the loaves, and when he had given thanks, he distributed them to those who were seated. And so also the fish, as much as they wanted. And when they were satisfied, he told the disciples, "Gather up the fragments that are left over so that nothing may be lost." So they gathered them up, and from the fragments of the 5 barley loaves left by all those who had eaten, they filled 12 baskets. When the people saw this sign that he had done, they began to say, "This is indeed the prophet. This is the one who is to come into the world." And when Jesus realized that they were about to come and take him by force to make him a king, he withdrew to a mountain by himself. One of the things that I love about the Bible is that there are so many different messages layered into all these stories. And it's amazing how you can hear the same story at a different point in your life. And at one point, something was so real and jumped out. And then at another point, something completely different jumps out. That's what I love about the Bible. And let me just put in one more plug, as I often get in periodically, for Bible study. We have a great Bible study at 12 o'clock on Sundays on Zoom. And I know it's right in the middle of Sunday, but during the regular year, we'll do it Tuesday evening as well. But we always wind up, I always call it a no such thing as a dumb question asked Bible study. You do not need to know anything about the Bible to actually not only get a lot out of it, but give a lot to it. So, okay, Bible study commercial is over. The last time I preached on this story, I focused on the fact that the Emperor Tiberius had changed the name of the sea, taken control of it, taken control of the fishing industry, which is the main thing there, and as narcissistic, megalomaniac, authoritarian leaders so often do, put his name on it. And we talked about how the feeding of the 5,000 was a subversive political act. Today, I'm going in a completely different direction. And I'm going to focus instead on the miracle. The feeding of 5,000 with just a few loaves of bread and 2 fish. I mean, did that really happen? And what about miracles anyway? What do you think about miracles, these Bible stories? What do we do with them? Do you have to take them literally in order to take them seriously? Do they still happen? Do you have to believe that miracles happened or that Jesus did these miracles, miraculous healings, in order to get anything out of these stories? Well, it's amazing to me how much energy we modern, sophisticated people put into figuring out ways to hear these stories and not believe in miracles. I mean, there's a part of us that thinks, oh, that's nonsense. This is just primitive people trying to make sense out of things. Instead of we calling people demon possessed now, we'd say they had an epileptic seizure or something, We figure out ways. There's a woman named Nadia Bolz-Weber. Some of you know of Nadia. She's a pretty well-known Lutheran pastor and author and happens to be a friend of mine. She is quite a character. She wrote one time, she said, being a Christian can sometimes be just a wee bit embarrassing. I mean, since I believe in Jesus, sometimes it feels like my normal friends, most of whom don't want to have anything to do with the church or organized religion, and often for very good reasons, they look at me like they suspect I might also think that the Easter Bunny is real, or believe elves and trees really do make Keebler cookies. It's all a bit fantastical, this Jesus stuff, and the miracles are especially embarrassing to say you believe in. My friends who aren't Christians know that that the laws of Newtonian physics aren't suddenly flexible if you just have enough faith. Atoms and molecules don't just shapeshift willy-nilly. It's more reasonable that things just are what they are. 5 loaves are 5 loaves, right? They don't just somehow miraculously multiply, right? Now, this is me, not Nadia. I don't think you have to believe that the laws of physics were defied in order to hear some deep messages in this story. But just to be clear, I don't have any problem with miracles. It is not a big stretch. I mean, when you think about it, here we are gathered around this story, around a being we call God, this creator. I mean, even just if you really believe that, it's pretty out there. It's not a big stretch for me to say, yes, there is a mind and a heart or some sort of source of love behind all that is, and it wants to know us, and it created us and everything else and wants to be in relationship, and it came to the earth in the person we call Jesus. I mean, the moment you go down any of those roads, you're taking a detour from rational, scientifically, empirically verifiable truth. So it's not that big of a deal to me to think that maybe somehow something wild happened that day. But I don't need miracles in order to believe in miracles. I know that sounded like double talk. Here's what I mean. I think the best miracles, the most powerful miracles, are more along the lines of a shift in perspective. To quote A Course in Miracles, a book called that. Some kind of shift or change that happens that changes everything. Getting back to the story and to Nadia Bolz-Weber, she writes, some people say what happened that day was obviously more like a big wilderness potluck, where everybody felt so compelled to be good after hearing Jesus' wonderful preaching that they all opened up their secret stash of food, their picnic baskets, and they gave parts of their fried chicken and potato salad to their neighbors. So that, and not miracles, is why there was enough food to go around. The miracle was that everybody risked sharing the little they had. And then she says, but I just can't bear to preach a Jesus wants you to be nice and share your juice box sermon to you today, because I suspect you learned that in nursery school. Not that thousands of human beings sharing with their neighbors isn't a little miraculous. It is. And we need more of it. It's just that this story is told 6 times in the gospel, more than any others. So maybe it's just too important a story for it to be just about sharing your lunch. Because miracles, she says, and not lessons about sharing, are what we really need. So as crazy as it is, writes Nadia, I believe in miracles, not because I think I'm supposed to, but because I need to. I need to believe that God does what we cannot do. I need to believe that God can make something out of nothing. A God who actually can feed so many with so little. A God who created the universe out of nothing, who can put flesh on dry bones, nothing, that can put life in a dry womb, nothing. Nothing is God's favorite material to work with, evidently. Perhaps God looks upon that which we dismiss as nothing, or insignificant or worthless, and says, ha, now there's something I can work with. So my favorite message in this story is simply this. The people were hungry. You can hear that literally, physically, or metaphorically, spiritually. The people were hungry. And Jesus knew God wanted them to be fed. They didn't have what they needed to feed everyone, literally. So they found what they did have. They put it in Jesus' hands, and then they did what Jesus said. And somehow, not only was it enough, but it was way more than enough. So let's just forget about miracles breaking laws of physics for a second. Because here's the real point. When you feel like you've got nothing, or worse, when you feel like you have destroyed everything, when you feel like you are nothing, or that you simply don't have what you need to pull something off, or to stop doing something that you know you need to stop doing, but you've tried and you can't. This scripture is saying this. Give it, whatever it is, give yourself to God. And simply say, I can't, but I believe you can. And see what happens. Now, you can't play games with this. And you say, well, what does it mean to give something? Well, you know if you mean it. If you're up against something and you don't have what it takes to pull it off or to see it through or to deal with it, we all have our ways that we can escape, right? Distract ourselves, numb ourselves, anesthetize ourselves. Giving it to Christ means being radically honest about what's going on and just saying, okay, I need help. And the story is just telling us one way or another, and we can argue forever how it happens, but one way or another, if we do that, and I dare you, I dare you, do that where you really need to do it. And mean it with all your heart, as much as you can. And see what happens. See if what comes back to you isn't more than enough to do what you need to do. See it through. But even better, and here's my real message this morning, you got lots left over. I mean, what comes back is often so good. And this story is really about the generosity of God. All right, so I'm gonna close by sharing a story with you. And I think you'll see the connection. I hope so. Oh, by the way, just one more pointer. When you give it to God, don't take it back. I mean, this story is the opposite of taking things into your own hands. And a lot of us are really afraid to trust God with something. I mean, the really important stuff. And so at some point we feel like, okay, well, God hasn't come through. Sometimes it takes some time. And in the meantime, you got to do what's yours to do. If Jesus tells you to go make the people sit down, tell them to sit down. Groups of 50, okay. I don't know why. Jesus said that. Just do it. So I've told you a lot of stories about my daughter, Emma. Not too much about my son, Sam. And I don't tell you these stories from my life to make the message about me, but I tell them to share with you how this stuff gets real in my life so that you can see how it might be real in yours. My son, Sam, he's 37 now. Just an amazing kid, man. He's way different from my daughter. You've seen Emma on Zoom a lot. You haven't seen Sam once, have you? That's a good start for my point. My son Sam he's more introverted. He's more quiet. He's not going to just give you his inner self. He's not going to, on his own volition, easily extend himself to people. He's not going to talk about deep personal things with many people. But there's a beautiful heart and an awful lot going on inside him. He went to college, and I won't get into the details, but something happened on his campus that he was very, very upset about. And the campus should have engaged in some disciplinary action that they did not, and there was a dangerous person around the campus. And my son knew him and was furious at what had happened. And my son called me up and said, "Dad, here's what happened." He told me the details, and he said, "If I see this guy, I might kill him." And I'm not kidding. He said, "I'm scared of what's going to happen if I run into this guy." And then he said, "Dad, could you fly down? It's in North Carolina. Could you come down and just spend a couple of days with me?" Now, my son does not ask for help. So that was a miracle right there. And for some of you, asking for help, it's going to take some help. So he said, "Dad, could you come down?" I was so touched that he asked. Absolutely. Cleared my schedule, got on a plane, rented a car, flew down there. And we spent a couple of days together. And it was two of the most grace-filled, beautiful days I have ever had with my son. And mostly we were just hiking and talking, but he really opened up about what had happened and what was going on and how he felt about it and why he was so upset. One of his favorite musicians is the singer-songwriter John Hyatt. And we were college was just outside Asheville, North Carolina. So we were walking around downtown Asheville, North Carolina, hear this music off in this parking lot. And we walk over there, and there's John Hyatt and the Mississippi Altar Boys doing a free concert in this parking lot, no bigger than our church parking lot, and about maybe twice as many people right here or there. I have no idea. And then he was followed up by the Marshall Tucker Band. But we just walk up there, and Sam looks at me, and I look at him, and we're just like, "Oh, man, it doesn't get any better than this, does it?" And he was not big about the God stuff. But he turned to me, and he said, "This feels like a blessing. Just to be here with you. Thanks for coming down." And then that night where he lived with some other guys, they had a fire pit. And he and I made a fire, and we sat outside by the fire, and we were just talking. And he said, "Dad, I got to talk to you about something." I said, "What?" He said, "I want to talk to you about God." And I think I've shared this with some of you before. But he said, you and I have never really talked much about God, have we? And I said, no. He said, I've made it pretty clear that I don't want to talk about it too much, do I? Haven't I, Dad? I said, yeah. And he said, well, here's the thing. Am I going to be a disappointment to you if I never really wind up believing in God? And it was one of those holy moments because I got a chance to say, oh, Sam. First of all, you couldn't be a disappointment to me. Second of all, just be who you are. Third of all, call it whatever you want. I see God all over you. So whether you believe in God in the way you think I do or not, I don't care. All I can say is in that beautiful heart of yours and your integrity, God's all up in you. Don't worry about it. Just be you. And you could kind of feel him just exhale. And that changed everything. Well, what's that got to do with our story? To me, those encounters, those conversations, what happened, what they were about, the ability to go to those places, that was just given. That's the more than enough. It started with him asking for some help. So what about you? What do you need help with? What have you come up against where you just have this sense of, I don't have what it takes? Or I'm scared I'm not going to be able to deal with this. Put it in the hands of Christ. And don't worry about how it happens. But trust that something will be given to you such that you have what you need to do what it is you have to do, or be who you want or need or long to be. Doesn't get any better than that.